everyone, it's Sevy. Beidou is yet another amazing 4-star featured on the second half of 2.4 banners, and you can get a free copy of her in the Lantern Rite event. The Crux Fleet's captain is one of the strongest off-field DPSs in the game thanks to her powerful electro chaining mechanic and a rewarding skill to master. In this guide, we'll talk about her kit, playstyles, constellations, stats, artifacts, weapons, and teams so you can best experience the power that ended Haishan. Let's begin. When it comes to Beidou's kit, let's start with her skill. When Beidou holds her skill, she forms a temporary shield that can absorb damage for a short amount of time, and you can hold it for 3 seconds maximum. The shield absorption scales on her HP. When the shield is released, Beidou then deals electro damage around her. Referring to the skill description, this damage has 3 levels. The base damage is the first level if she doesn't get hit. Then there's the damage bonus on hit taken multiplier. If she's hit, this stacks on the base damage, which can only stack a maximum of 2 times, hence level 2 and 3. It doesn't matter how much damage Beidou absorbs when she gets hit, but rather how many times she's hit. Environmental damage like burning grass counts towards those hits too, which you can abuse to quickly get the max damage. It gets more fun when you unlock her first Ascension passive. This allows her to deal the maximum damage instantly if she executes a perfect counter, meaning you have to release the skill within a fraction of a second after she gets hit. This is based on the player's skill and reaction time, and while it's not really necessary to master, if you're dedicated to maximizing Beidou, then you'll want to get as good as possible at this. Her skill is also her source of electro energy particles. The more damage stacks you achieve, the more particles you generate. The ideal scenario is to perfect counter instantly so that you get the maximum damage and particles. Then there's her burst, which is what makes her an amazing off-field DPS. At C0, Beidou's burst discharges electro damage to one enemy, which can chain 2 times as long as there's another nearby enemy, totaling 3 hits. The electro discharge has to be triggered by normal and charged attacks and can be triggered as often as once every 1 second. To emphasize, there needs to be at least 2 enemies nearby for Beidou's lightning arcs to chain. That's why she's much more effective against enemy mobs. Against a single boss, its firepower is greatly reduced. Note also that the burst snapshots, so you want to give her the relevant buffs before she casts it, and you shouldn't depend on the burst for proccing reaction damage. Rather, it's more important to increase its raw electro damage. But aside from dealing damage, it also provides your team with more survivability thanks to its increased resistance to interruption and damage reduction. This is especially helpful for supporting DPSs that are squishy and don't want their attacks to be interrupted, like Yoimiya or Yanfei. The caveat of this incredible burst is its 80 energy cost. Beidou typically needs a good amount of energy recharge and or a team battery to get her burst up as often as possible. Aside from those, maximizing her skill's particle generation will help in addressing her energy cost. We'll discuss her energy needs more in the next sections. Beidou is typically played off-field with her burst being constantly procced by an on-field teammate, which is referred to as a driver. Having another member drive her burst ensures that its potential is maximized, which I'll also give tips on later. Finally, when it comes to her normal attacks, she has a 5-hit attack sequence. Some of its animations are a bit slow and they don't time well with her burst's electro discharge rate. In order for her to more consistently proc her burst, the fastest attack animation involves canceling either her first or second normal attack hit and repeating this so that you can avoid the slow 3rd hit animation. Her charged attack swings her claymore forward, but you won't be able to use her skill while it's ongoing. But to help address her slow animations, Beidou's second Ascension passive increases both her normal and charged attack damage and attack speed by 15% if you achieve her skill's maximum damage bonus. You likely won't have to see these attacks since she's mostly an off-field character, but there are players who build her into an on-field physical DPS. You'll find numerous reasons why this isn't a meta recommendation, such as there are better dedicated physical DPSs you can build, or that building her physical damage potential means sacrificing her electro damage potential, which is her best asset. These are valid points, but if you really want to play this way and see a lot of her on field, don't let those reasons discourage you. I'll be mentioning some build tips for a physical Beidou later on. So which talents should you prioritize? If you plan to play her off field, get her burst as high as possible, followed by her skill. The auto attack talent level can be left unleveled. If you're going to play her on field, I would still recommend investing the most in her burst since it's still a main source of damage. then her normal attack and skill talents can be leveled alongside each other. Beidou with no constellations is absolutely still worth using, but some of her constellations can bring a lot to the table. Let's go through them. C1 gives her burst an Electro Shield that absorbs damage based on her max HP. It's not going to compete with Tank Fae or dedicated talent shields, but it's okay for added survivability. C2 lets her burst jump 2 more times, which gives it much more DPS against enemy mobs. Simply put, this is a very strong early constellation that is highly recommended to get. C3 increases her skill's damage ceiling. It's more valuable if you're good at perfect countering. C4 is more for an on-field DPS Beidou, since it gives your normal attacks an electro damage instance when Beidou gets hit. Even if she's shielded, as long as she gets hit, this effect will trigger. Strangely, it also procs when she does charged attacks, even if the description doesn't include it. Anyway, it's a small damage bump, but it does help with electro application and triggering reactions. C5 is a great constellation as it makes Beidou's burst deal more overall damage. Finally, C6 is a fitting completion of Beidou's kit by shredding electro resistance of nearby enemies. It also makes her a better teammate paired with other electro units. In summary, C2, C5, and C6 are Beidou's best constellations that offer the biggest damage bumps. Now onto her build, starting with what artifact stats to prioritize. For the crit circlet, it's either crit rate or damage depending on what you need to compensate. Aim for at least 50% crit rate and 100% crit damage. A temporary attack percent circlet can also work. For the goblet, electro damage bonus is the top priority, but if you don't have one, an attack percent goblet can replace it in the meantime. If you do run her as a physical on-field DPS, then you can either switch to a physical damage goblet or keep the electro damage goblet and just get the physical bonus from artifact set effects to make her more of an electro-physical hybrid DPS. Finally, for the sands, it's a matter of choosing between attack percent or energy recharge. This depends on how much ER your Beidou is currently lacking. A good ER baseline to target first is 160%, and this can increase or decrease depending on how well you can battery her, what her weapon is, and if she's paired with electro teammates. Ideally, your ER will come from substats or set effects, and giving her an attack percent sans will be the most optimal for overall damage. But again, this is subject to individual player experience and artifact luck. Then for substats, crit stats, attack, and energy recharge are what you want to get. Now for her best artifact sets. For low AR players, you can use the following. The 2-piece Exile and 2-piece Scholar sets are top recommendations to address her energy needs. The 2-piece Resolution of Sojourner and Braveheart are good for more attack. The Berserker set can give her crit rate if needed. You can also go with the 4-piece Braveheart set as it offers a good damage bonus against 50% and above HP enemies. And if you use her for her normal and charged attacks, then the 2-piece and 4-piece Martial Artist is a great set for her. Mix and match these according to your preference. Then for high AR players, starting with her best off-field DPS sets. Assuming you can get really good substats, the 4-piece emblem is the top choice. The 2-piece is very helpful for addressing her ER needs and lets you target more offensive substats, while the 4-piece effect helps in maximizing burst damage, especially if you have a buffer like Bennett or Sarah. However, don't stack too much energy recharge on her at the expense of sacrificing attack or crit stats, as that will result in unbalanced stats and diminishing returns. I'd say reaching 200% is already overboard, as that likely means you're sacrificing other offensive stats. But overall, if you want a long-term goal, this is the set to go for. However, that will take lots of luck and resin, so alternatively, the more convenient set to farm would be a combination of 2-piece Thundering Fury, paired with either a 2-piece Noblesse emblem or 2-piece Glad Shimenawa. The 2-piece Noblesse is more preferable, especially if you run her with an attack buffer. Having these combinations could save you more resin in the long run, rather than trying to force a 4-piece set. Another set, though more niche, is the Thunder Soother set, which does give a good damage boost for both Beidou's skill and burst, but it needs to be run specifically with an Electro Charge or Electro Focus team. This has the downside of making her less flexible. What if you're using Beidou as a physical DPS? Your most convenient option is a combination of 2-piece Pale Flame, 2-piece Bloodstain, 2-piece Glad, or Shimenawa. Or you can mix a physical set with 2-piece Thundering Fury for a hybrid build. Could the 4-piece Pale Flame work? I wouldn't recommend it. If you look at its description, the 4-piece stack lasts 7 seconds, but note that Beidou's skill has a cooldown of 7.5 seconds. To make it workable, you'd need effects that reduce cooldowns like Animo Resonance or Chongyun's skill. little. Even then, it's still cutting it too close, so it's best to stick with other non-conditional sets. You can go with a 4-piece Gladiator's Finale if you've passively farmed a good full set. It doesn't benefit her charged attacks though, forcing you to fully optimize your normal attacks. Now let's look at her best weapon choices. We want weapons that improve her offensive stats or energy needs. Let's start with the 3-star options. The Blood-Tainted Greatsword is okay, better if you run her with an Overload, Electro Charge, or Electro Focus team. The EM substat won't be used that much though. The Debate Club is also usable, though its triggered effect is more geared to an on-field Beidou. But even for an off-field build, at least she still makes use of that attack percent substat. And the Skyrider Greatsword is another option for an early AR physical DPS build. Then for her 4-star options. The best free-to-play options are the Prototype Archaic and Luxurious Sea Lord. The Prototype Archaic is a dependable all-around weapon that gives a good amount of attack, which could be used for either an on-field or off-field DPS build. Even if you use Beidou as a physical DPS, there's merit in choosing the Archaic over Snowtombed Star Silver, since Archaic's attack substat at least improves both her physical and electro, while Snowtombed is skewed towards physical damage. The Luxurious Sea Lord is then better for a burst build compared to a Prototype Archaic, that is, if you got it from its limited run. One more free-to-play option is the Blackcliff Slasher. Without the stacks, it's, at best, a stat stick for crit damage. And with an off-field build, Beidou won't usually be the one defeating the enemies, but if you run your Beidou with attack buffers like Bennett or Sarah, this can edge out the Prototype Archaic, but only by a bit. You can stick with the previous options to save Star Glitter. For gacha weapons, the Aqua Maru is an excellent option for a burst build that gets more value with high burst cost teams. It's good value even at R1. The Lithic Blade is also another great contender for being a good crit rate and attack stat stick. In this case, running her with at least one more Liyue teammate is recommended. If you're willing to pay, the Battle Pass reward Serpent Spine is one of her top weapons that can even beat other 5-stars. It helps with building her crit stats. The passive effect provides a high damage bonus multiplier, which balances well with attack buffing supports, and it synergizes well with her kit as an off-field DPS since she shouldn't take any damage. It's still usable for an on-field Beidou as long as you're good at dodging and shielding. Most importantly, it looks badass with her. When you're using this in Spiral Abyss, it's best that Beidou's the first member so she can wait to gain full stacks before starting the run. There are 4-star energy recharge claymores, Sack Greatsword, Favonius Greatsword, and the Inazuma Craftable Claymore. These help with her burst uptime a lot, but they hurt your damage potential. In the late game, you should ideally have enough ER from her artifact substats anyway. As for the 5-star options, generally all 5-star options will work well on her, with Wolf's Gravestone and the Unforged as the best general picks for being huge attack stat sticks. The Skyward Pride has the benefit of addressing her ER needs, and the Song of Broken Pines is great if you want her as a physical DPS. The latest Redhorn Stone Thresher is good as another stat stick, though it's ideally suited for an on-field DPS build to maximize its passive. As an off-field DPS, Beidou is generally flexible in team comps. Of course, there are some synergies you want to target to maximize Beidou's utility. For one, characters who can attack quickly enough to act as a reliable driver for Beidou's burst are a good pair. For example, characters like Child, Yoimiya, Keqing, and Kokomi. Their fast attack animations will efficiently trigger Beidou's burst procs. Beidou also helps single-target DPSs a lot by being the AoE DPS working alongside them. For example, Yoimiya, Kokomi, and Ningguang. Electro charge teams are also exceptionally good with Beidou thanks to her consistent electro application and reactions. This needs hydro units like Child, Kokomi, or Xingqiu. Or if you want an overload team, there's Yanfei, Yoimiya, Hu Tao, Diluc, or Klee as the on-field pyro drivers. Beidou can help proc Superconduct for physical DPSs like Eula and Chi-Chi 2, or just with other cryo units. Then you should consider how well your team can help battery Beidou, something that's usually done with another Electro unit and by taking advantage of the Electro Resonance effect. Electro Traveler is the top pick as an Electro battery, but Fischl or Raiden are also great options. Unfortunately, Raiden's burst doesn't proc Beidou's burst, which means that if they're paired together, you should not activate their bursts in conjunction. Of course, adding supports to buff her damage is always a good idea. Anemo supports with 4-piece VV are good for electro resistance shredding, or go with Sarah or Bennett for buffing her attack. There are many more team variations as long as you keep in mind the guidelines I mentioned. Now, what if Beidou is your physical DPS? Well, she needs a cryo member to proc Superconduct. So Rosaria, Kaya, Chongyun, or Diona are good candidates for that. My best pick is Rosaria for her energy generation, reliable cryo application, crit rate sharing, and physical resistance shred at C6 if you have it. Then you can add another Electro member to act as a battery or sub DPS like Electro Traveler or Fischl. Some Geo characters are also good teammates. Albedo can sub DPS, Yunjin can buff her NAs, and Zhongli can be a reliable shielder and resistance shredder. You can even go with a support healer Ningguang build equipped with Prototype Amber. These are all solid picks. Even without achieving Georesonance, they're still viable here. These are just general team recommendations though. As long as you know what Beidou's main functions are as an off-field DPS and Electro applier, you can decide best if she'll work in your draft team comps. So that's going to be it for this updated guide, everyone. If you plan on maining Beidou or are a Beidou main already, I would love to know down in the comments how you're building her. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel for more Genshin guides and content, and I will see you soon. Take care!